We had our song here this morning to show you how God works. There ain't no coincidences. Some even believe there's no such thing as accidents. It said in our song this morning, which we just sang, they are children of God. Children of God. Well, the reading that I chose this morning, without any knowledge of that song that we just sang, says this from Romans chapter 8, 14 to 17. For those who are led by the Spirit of God are children of God. For you did not receive a spirit of slavery to fall back into fear, but you have received a spirit of adoption, through which we cry, Abba, Father. The Spirit itself bears witness with our spirit that we are children of God. And children, then heirs. Heirs of God and joint heirs with Christ, if only we suffer with him, so that we may also be glorified with him. A reading from the Scripture. There you go. It's interesting. Children of God. Children of God. Now, you think about, like, if somebody doesn't believe in God, why don't they believe in God? There's a number of different ways we can portray that, even though you may not put it in these words. I don't believe in God. That's for kids. That's for weak people. I'm an intelligent human being. I'm not going to believe in some airy spirit hovering around answering all your prayers. I'm too intelligent for that. I'm too educated for that. That's for children, Santa Claus, and all other fantasies. Now, I would venture to guess, that part of that attitude, there is a capital sin. The sin of pride. I'm too good. I'm too intelligent, I'm too educated, I'm too smart to believe in God. Children of God, what an insult. What an insult. You didn't call me a child. I'm an adult. I'm grown up. I know better. Leave that to children and fairy tales and Aesop's fables and all that stuff. And so we have this sense, that the sense of so much pride that one believes it's beneath them to be humble enough to believe in an almighty creator that we are subject to. Okay, so now that we have explored some of the very basic logic concerning the existence of God, as we have established with our study of Thomas Aquinas, even to the very basic point of whatever you want to give him as a name. God, the Creator, the unmoved mover, the primary initiator, whatever you want to call it, the beginning, the ultimate force, whatever. And even, just like I bring this up again because it's so magnificent in terms of, Moses saying, who are you? Who are you? He's all mystified by this so-called manifestation of the bush. And totally mystified in this mystical experience. Who are you? I am. I am who am. That is so magnificent when you think about that, because God's saying, look, I am. No matter what you call me, I am. And so that's basically saying, I exist whether you believe in me or not. And that, of course, is the fundamental option, the fundamental choice. You either believe in God or you don't. And again, I did this, comparison somewhat between Thomas Aquinas and Stephen Hawking. God bless Stephen Hawking. He was a genius, contributed a lot to the science of physics and so on and so forth. But that fundamental option is so basic, Okay, so now that we've established a logic for the existence of God, we have to begin to explore something that's probably the next pertinent issue. And that's why I chose. There's so much, Thomas Aquinas, there's so much that can be learned, from this angelic doctor who was originally called by other people the dumb ox. Shows you how we can misjudge each other, right? And so anyway, we have this thing where we need to begin to explore the relationship that we have with this Creator. And we haven't even gotten into dogma, doctrine, sacramentality. I do want to get into next time into Jesus Christ as the Son of God. But before we do that, there's something that we need to recognize the existence of. And that is the existence of the human soul. There we go, the human soul. Now that is something that is debatable among, people of education, so to speak, in the sense that is there or is there not a soul? What is the soul? Okay, it's immaterial, we know that. It's not a physical entity like our liver, our spleen, various other organs that constitutes our functioning creatures, if you want to put it that way. Okay, now, again, operating on the basic principle, creation is possible for God alone. Only God can create in terms of the ultimate creation of everything, okay? To create from nothing, now that's a pretty hard concept to wrap your mind around, in the sense of, nothing. How can there be nothing? Well, even that concept, just like, the magnificent, culture that gave rise to the originating of the theory of zero. Nobody ever thought of zero before. So then somebody, in this educated culture came up with saying zero. Well, what is zero? Zero is nothing. That's kind of interesting. And that's in the mathematical realm, which shows how intelligent we human beings are in exploring the nature of measuring things, okay? Okay, so now to create from nothing then requires infinite power. Well, we know what power is, okay? Power is what it is, it's energy, it's getting things done, it's motivation, it's, having energy. Your energy's high today, your energy's low today, and there's energy regulation. People are lost energy with this storm, okay, so they're all upset because they ain't got no energy, they ain't got no power. Okay, so the thing is, infinite power. How can you conceive of infinite, unlimited power? Of course, we know that in nuclear fission, you split an atom, what do? You get like a lot of energy, you get a lot of power. Now, the quest is for fusion. Fusion, which is like cold energy, as opposed to splitting the atom. You smash a lot of atoms together, and and what do? You get unlimited power. That means if we ever can find that source of power in that way, fusion, energy will be free. There'll be no utility bills, because there'll be so much infinite power, then we won't have to have the utility companies. Now, because I'm exaggerating, I'm getting into an area of expertise here, but anyway, this whole thing of conceiving of infinite power. Okay, that's God. All right. Matter, matter, okay, is not the cause of diversity in things. Okay? So when we think about the diversity of things, matter, the whole sense of what is concrete, what is atomic, neutrons, electrons, protons, muons, and all those other little things, quarks and all the little stuff makes up everything as far as they can ascertain, okay? So what do we talk about in terms of the diversity of things when we begin to enter into our human intelligence and the mind entering into meaning and purpose? How do we delve into, finding a meaning for everything and finding a purpose for everything? As far as we know, the other creatures and animals, they don't worry about that. To them, it's a survival thing. Eat, drink, and stay alive. I mean, that's pretty much what motivates most creatures, okay? Now, we can give a modicum of intelligence to, some animals, like squirrels and dogs and other creatures, okay? Give them a little bit of credit. We don't even call that thinking. It's more instinct. But anyway, meaning and purpose. That's the realm of the human being, the human creature. Okay, so now, the divine action, the action of God, which brings things into being, does not suppose the pre-existence of matter. In other words, if God created something out of nothing, there couldn't have been matter pre to that or before that. Okay, so we established that principle. And so this is where we come to understand that matter is not a cause. Matter is not a cause. the cause becomes a little bit more complicated. We begin to trace things back even to the very ultimate origin of everything. Whatever you want to call it. You know, what some physicists said that was constituted in the Big Bang. That just happened to happen. Bang! Here you go. All right? What happened before the Big Bang? We're not concerned with that. All right, why not? I guess. Okay, but anyway, so us, God does not need pre-existing matter from which to fashion things. Therefore, God does not presuppose matter in his activity. Okay, that's very basic, but it's something that needs to be recognized when we start talking about this thing, the nature of the soul. Okay, so now, as we begin to delve into that thing about the nature of the soul, I'm going to look at it basically from this way. When the form in matter, like we have form, you know, you're formed. You got, you know, height, width, depth, and stuff like that, dimensions. When the form in matter is the origin of imminent actions, which mean actions that take place, actions that happen, it gives origin to life. Okay, this whole thing about, you know, what constitutes or what is life, what gives life, and as such is more particularly called the soul. This is what we call the soul. You know, life, as we believe, is the very core and nature of our existence in terms of our being alive. Alive. There is, now I'm going to break this down. I need to go into some further explanation about why we look at it this way. Okay, then it gets into us in the nature of the immortal soul. The immortal soul, which is not immortal soul. And I'm going to have to tell you, animals do not have immortal souls. And I want to get into that a little bit to differentiate us from all other creatures on the face of the earth. Okay, so here we go. Now, there is a vegetative soul. Okay, this is what we call a vegetative soul, such as the principle of plants. Now, we normally don't think of a plant as having a soul. Your philodendron has a soul. You know, your corn, your food, everything, you know, when it was growing, when it was just, you know, when it was alive, it's a living entity, okay, because of, you know, biological, photosynthetic activities, or whatever you want to talk about, and understanding the nature of what gives a plant life, because, you know, what happens is, like, say, for example, eventually a plant's going to die. Ah, my plant's dead. The lilies are dead. Yeah, dead. Okay, all right, let's throw them out. They're no longer alive. Isn't it interesting, you know? But then again, we're starting to say that, well, yeah, the plant had a life, so to speak. It was alive. Okay, vegetative soul. Look at that. All right, now, such as the principal plants whose activity is fulfilled. Their activity is fulfilled by nutrition, growth, and reproduction. Okay, we all know that. Okay, that's pretty basic biology, and so on. And so botany, I guess, is it botany? Is that plants? Botany? Okay. There you go, okay. Superior to the vegetative is the sensitive soul. The sensitive soul. Now, the sensitive soul, which is present in animals, this sensitive soul in animals, cats, dogs, lions, tigers, and bears, and various other assorted creatures. Right? Okay, the sensitive soul, which is present in animals, besides the processes of nutrition, but they need that too, they gotta eat, right? Growth and reproduction, the sensitive soul is capable of sensitive knowledge, and appetite, okay, appetite, a longing for, seeking for something. Your rover, your doggy is hungry. What are you going to do? He's got enough sensitive knowledge to bark to you, fill that plate with his food at a certain time during the day. They have this magnificent sense. Dogs, they know what time of day it is. I don't know how they know. My cat knew that what time of day it was, for God's sake. Okay, I guess we could call that sensitive knowledge. Okay, sensitive knowledge and appetite. Superior still to the sensitive soul is the rational soul. Guess who that is? The rational soul. We have the rational soul. So we see, in terms of Thomas Aquinas, making these distinctions in terms of the nature of the soul regarding plants, animals, vegetables, and it knows us with the rational soul. Okay, now, the human soul performs the functions of the vegetative. We have a vegetative aspect, right? Like a plant. Boy, he's growing like a plant. Boy, he's sprouting up. You know, we talk about kids that way. Boy, he sprouted, didn't he? Okay, and then you got this sensitive life, you know, the sensitive life. Okay, you got this thing like when a baby who's like wondering where they are on this planet, you know, suddenly gets hungry. What do they do as a response, a sensitive response? They're going to start crying because they know instinctively that by them making a lot of noise, that other creature called mom is going to do something. Okay? So we have that dimension, right? But besides these functions, it has activities which do not depend on the body. That do not depend on the body. Understanding, this is what we call understanding. Nature, understanding, which is what basically Thomas Aquinas is giving us an understanding, okay? And volition, the whole sense of decision making, the whole thing that eventually constitutes, you know, the principles of morality and ethics, the whole thing about intelligence, intellect, problem solving, you know, and so on and so forth. You know, dealing with the immaterial, things that are not solid, things that have to do with, you know, if you've ever seen a brain, it looks like a bunch of mush. There's not much to it. You mean to tell me that everything that constitutes a human being in every dimension and aspect of their existence is in that lump of flesh? Well, some people believe that, you know, but there's got to be something else in terms of the animation of everything physical, which is the immaterial, which is the nature of the magnificence of the soul infused into us to bring about life in its totality. Not, you know, in just like the organs, you know, well, the brain's another organ, we got a bunch of these organs. If one organ goes bad, now we got these things, we can replace an organ and so on and so forth. You know, that whole thing is all very good. But when we're talking about the totality of life and its unity, we're basically talking about the nature of the soul. Okay, now, one of the dimensions about this that I want to touch on a little bit is that this is what the secular world constitutes or believes. Many now think that science will be able to explain the mind materially by the working of the brain, without any need of a soul. The mind is regarded as a capacity, the capacity of the brain. The mind has a power. The mind is a capacity of the body. Okay, body. Okay, now, but this is what Thomas Aquinas says in opposition to that. Okay, as a capacity is always the capacity of something. Even the brain has a capacity of something else. The mind cannot be a capacity of the body if it is immaterial. So if we regard the soul as immaterial, which can't be measured or quantified, which is what we believe by faith, so it must be the capacity of something else. The capacity of that something else is what we call the soul. And this is what differentiates these two viewpoints in terms of the exclusivity of just the sole function of the brain without anything else, immaterial, and Thomas Aquinas introducing the nature of the immaterial, which constitutes the soul, which again is that capacity for life. Okay, so now, the intellect and the will do not form something called the mind over the soul. Okay, because you start talking about the mind over the soul, then the conclusion is going to be, well, if we understand the mind, we don't need no soul. And of course, that constitutes one of the elements of atheism, atheism. Okay, so now, mind, but are powers of the soul according to Aquinas, and so it's the opposite, you know, in the sense that the soul is over the mind, whereas you need that nature understanding of the soul according to Aquinas, in terms of understand the totality of life and our complete total existence. Okay, so now, The non-believers, again, just general group, the non-believers, the mind replaces the soul, and so they leave out the soul. Why talk about it? It's immaterial. They consider the mind on its own. Okay, now, in order for the body to be living in the first place, for Aquinas, there is a single source of all our vital activities, including thinking. The soul, which gives us our unity, our completeness, the soul has not only to do with consciousness, being conscious, but with life itself. Just our very existence beyond everything else. Just the very fact that we're alive is because of the infusion of the soul, which leaves the body at the point of death. And it's immortal. With life itself. Life itself. The soul, according to Aquinas, is not just the mind. For Aquinas, everything has a soul. Thomas first establishes that the soul is the principle of life. That's the principle of life, the soul. It is not just any principle of life. It is the primary principle of life. The primary principle. Okay, now, if we go into this a little bit further, which there's so much more, if we look at it this way, the primary principle of life cannot be a mere substance or object. Substance. Paper is substance. An object. Look at it. Those keys there. It's an object. All right, so here we go. If a mere substance or object, let's say, for example, like a stone. A stone isn't alive. It's a rock. Okay, it's not alive. If a mere substance or object would be alive, then all material substances and objects would be alive. Well, we know that's not true. So looking at it from that perspective, and so, as this is not the body is alive because of some principle. St. Thomas calls this principle the actuality, the totality of life, the actuality, actually being alive, actually living of the body, because it makes a certain kind of body with potential for having life actually living, or actually living. We can tell that a living body has a primary principle of life, and this is what we're calling, of course, obviously, the soul, because it is already living, because any of the organs of its vital unities appear. So the thing is like, okay, a liver. Is a liver alive? Can a liver be sustained without the rest of the body? That whole thing. So the whole thing about the organs of its vital activity, before they even appear, even the developmental stages in the fetus, where there's not, completely functioning organs, this is where we get into the whole thing about, abortion and contraception, is that life is alive. That is a being. That is a living soul in that fetus. Even though those organs are not fully functional at that point, but have a potentiality to eventually function in their fullness, and that's the gift of everything coming together out of the pure existence of that being, which is alive. All right, I'm just going to, I need to go in why our soul is immortal. I'll try to speed this up, quite a bit. Okay, here we go. Okay, now, for St. Thomas, the incorruptibility and immortality of the human soul goes with its immediate creation by God, okay? In the likeness and image. We're made in the likeness and image of God. Well, isn't that magnificent? We are made in the likeness and image of God as human beings. Since the soul of a human surpasses the capacity of matter in the way that it also knows things immaterially, we think about, even thinking about the existence of a soul as immateriality goes far beyond what we would have been capable of doing if God hadn't kind of created us, with this ability to have a soul and to know Him. Very basic. It cannot be drawn from matter. The principle of thinking in human beings transcends matter. The soul transcends matter, for it has an activity to which no bodily organ shares, namely, thinking of things in an immaterial and general way. We think of things in an immaterial and general way, and that is because of the intelligence coming forth from the life that we've been given through the existence of the soul, which is the capacity of everything, which is the principle of everything. And so, when we think about that, the whole thing of this immaterial, as the human soul is immaterial, it cannot be generated by the parents, but is caused by a creative act of God. Now that's a differentiation, which basically says that our bodies belong to God. You know? And so anyway, right now, the immortality of the soul. The reason why animals have sense and soul, but they're not immortal, is because, just in a very brief way, because I'm going to conclude this, is very simply this, that the whole thing of understanding that is that the soul in an animal is so intimately connected with its materiality. It's connected with its materiality, so much connected immediately with its body, which differentiates from us in the immortal soul, is that soul that animates the animal is totally tied to its physical existence only, its physical being. Okay. So that the gift of an animal having life coming from God, because it is so intimately connected exclusively to its functioning body, when that body dies, the soul no longer exists. Okay? I could go more into that, but we've run out of time.
Last question to ponder, Padre?
Yes, the questions. Let me get the questions here. All right, here are the questions, and the questions are simply this. The first question is, what were you taught about the soul? When would you suddenly, somebody told you about the soul? When did that happen? You know, what were you taught about the soul? How long ago was that? Was it like maybe like 6 years old? Hey, Louis, you got a soul. What's that? You know, whatever, you know what I'm saying. Okay, now the second question, corollary to that, who was your primary teacher of the faith? Who is your primary teacher when you look back on it? The primary teacher of the faith introduced you to the faith, which eventually would have led to talking about God and the soul and everything, the whole everything of faith and religion. So there are questions.
Thank you, Father.